President Donald Trump on the world stage touting a major victory while also facing urgent crises that threaten to overshadow that achievement. The president meeting with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer today after the U.S. announced a significant trade agreement with the European Union. But much of their talk, as Trump himself acknowledged, focused on the humanitarian emergency in Gaza. The World Health Organization says malnutrition-related deaths are spiking there this month, 63 reported in July alone. And yet, speaking about the enclave on Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu argued there was no starvation. Trump today notably breaking with Netanyahu offering direct U.S. support.
So we're going to set up food centers and where the people can walk in and no boundaries. We're also going to make sure that they don't have barriers stopping people. You know, you've seen the areas where they actually have food and the people are screaming for the food in there. We can save a lot of people. I mean, some of those kids that's real starvation stuff. I see it. And you can't fake that.
CNN's Jeff Zeleny is covering the president's trip in Scotland. And Jeff, talk there quickly, turning to the situation in Gaza, as we noted. What more are you hearing?
Well, the crisis in Gaza was the first order of business between the British Prime Minister and the American President when they met. In fact, that was the central reason for the Prime Minister coming to visit the President on what otherwise has been a mix of golfing as well as a diplomatic work here. But it was the idea of the British Prime Minister sort of applying some pressure to the American President, Donald Trump, to put some pressure on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to think harder about what is happening in Gaza and work toward a ceasefire. But the president acknowledging those images that we have all seen around the world of starvation, of the children, really a direct contradiction to what Netanyahu claimed over the weekend, that there was no starvation. So that perhaps was the biggest goal of all for European leaders, particularly British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, to get the American president on one page, on his side, and vowing to open food centers to try and alleviate some of the pain and suffering there. Of course, it's very much an open question. The president talked through how difficult it has been to get food on the ground where it is needed there, but certainly him acknowledging that is one step closer toward perhaps a policy change.
You know, you cover foreign policy, you cover the White House. What do we make of the president's rhetoric, first against Netanyahu in Israel and Gaza? Is this a change in policy? It's just a change in rhetoric? Or is this a real break from the Netanyahu government?
Well, we haven't seen a change in policy yet, but I think it's interesting that those comments came after meeting with Starmer, with von der Leyen over the weekend, with European allies who see the Gaza conflict a little differently, obviously, than Bibi Netanyahu, but have maybe had the ability to sway the president to emphasize, you know, what they see happening in Gaza as a real problem. When the president is at ease with allies, he will be open to hearing their points of view. And I think, you know, we heard it himself when he said on television, it sure looks like they're very hungry. He himself has seen the same images that everyone else has seen. This is, the audience of one president, right? It's always about television, the former reality TV star. The president sees those images himself. He's reacting to them. That seemed like a reaction in real time when he said, well, actually, based on the images I've seen, it sure does seem like those children are hungry. So that's a change in policy. The change sort of tightening the timeline with Vladimir Putin, another change in policy, moving him a little closer to the European position. And he's been hearing for a long time from NATO allies and from Republicans in Washington about the need to get a little bit tougher with Russia. The president wants to handle that himself, may not be interested in the Graham sanctions bill, but he, deep down, a European ally told me today that they think that ultimately this isn't about pressure. This is just the president realizing that he feels like he's getting played by Vladimir Putin and is tired of it. And Donald Trump, not a famously patient person, so it's understandable why he might shrink that timeline.
And just on the Gaza situation, which obviously has been increasingly dire, and the crisis over there, is talking about all the images that people are seeing. Clearly that has been resonating. Trump is seeing that, reacting to that this morning. But the break between him and Netanyahu over this is notable.
There is no starvation in Gaza. We enable humanitarian aid throughout the duration of the war to enter Gaza. Otherwise, there would be no Gazans.
We can save a lot of people. I mean, some of those kids that's real starvation stuff. I see it. And You can't fake that. So we're going to be even more involved.
I mean, there's no starvation, Netanyahu says. Trump says real starvation stuff. You can't fake that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is Netanyahu is losing allies even within his own nation. When you have Israeli agencies who are saying, yeah, there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, there is starvation, I think President Trump, quite frankly, has been patient with the Prime Minister of Israel.
His critics would say way too patient.
Very patient. I mean, especially because he said on day one he was going to help end this war, and then he kept giving Netanyahu time, kept, I would say, getting sweet talked by Netanyahu and believing what he was saying about how things are unfolding in the Israeli perspective. But I think now the images are becoming too powerful to, you know, have a blind eye to. And I think it's not just President Trump who's gotten there. He might be one of the last people to have gotten there, but I think he's here now, and now he's losing that patience.
And it's the American public, too.
Yes.
The viewpoint of the American public. This is just the CNN poll just out recently about this, asking how people view the Israeli military response to the Hamas attack. Back in October 2023, of course, in the wake of that horrific attack, 50% view the Israeli military response as fully justified. That is down 27 points to today, when just 23% of the American public sees it's fully justified. 22% now say not at all justified, which is an uptick of 14 points since then. A big shift among the American public.
And you're seeing it among Trump allies as well. But I think Eli is absolutely right. I think the pictures really have been made a huge difference with the president. I mean, look at his comments even from the last maybe weeks or a couple days. Initially, he was saying, you know, Israel's going to take care of that. This is Israel's problem. And then all the way to now where he's saying, I told Bibi Netanyahu that he's going to have to find another way to get hostages returned. So whether that progresses even more, we'll see. But he did promise to be sending more aid, more food. And that's something I know all of us will be watching to see how that's done.
And the political response you were mentioning about the Republicans and others, the person you cover very closely, Marjorie Taylor Greene, is someone, you look at someone to get their sense on how maybe that wing of the party is responding to something that's happening here. This is what she said about this. She said, I can unequivocally say what happened to the innocent people in Israel on October 7th was horrific. I can just as unequivocally say that what has been happening to innocent people and children in Gaza is horrific. So you're even seeing this change in viewpoint, perhaps, among some of the president's most loyal allies in the MAGA base.
Yeah, and I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene has always been pretty skeptical of the Israeli leadership. And of course, she's pretty isolationist as well. So she's always landed on the side of, the U.S. needs to stop, quite frankly, enabling Israel when it comes to the conflict with Hamas. But I think now the images, and quite frankly, she's part of that wing who above all says we have to protect children from many different things. But on this issue, it's protect children from starvation. And once the images are of children, then that is something that triggers the core of Marjorie Taylor Greene's politics in ways that get really complicated when we talk about other things. But I think this one is much less complicated and puts her on the side of politics where I think a lot of Americans agree with her. Again, Donald Trump, we know the imagery is going to have an impact on him. And the imagery right now is of not just starving children, but quite frankly, dying or dead children.
বস প্রহ্লাদ
অকলে অকলে তুমি কি ভাবিছা
বস প্রহ্লাদ
পিতা
গুৰুৰ গৃহত থাকি তুমি কিনো বাৰো পাত শিকিলা সহজে কোৱাচোন পুত্ৰ মোৰ নয়নৰ মণি
পিতা
প্ৰহ্লাদ
শুনা তেন্তে স্থিৰ কৰিব
কোৱা প্ৰহ্লাদ
শ্ৰৱণ কীৰ্তন স্মৰণ বিষ্ণুৰ অৰ্চন পদসেৱন দাস্য সখিত্য বন্দন বিষ্ণুৰ কৰিবা দেহৰ শ্ৰৱণ পিতা এই নবিদ ভক্তি আচরণ উত্তম
বন্ধ কর তুই সেই হরির মহিমা খন্দ আর অমর
মহারাজ
এই এনেকে শিক্ষা দিলি প্ৰহ্লাদক মোৰ
মহারাজ নমস্কাৰ হৰিলেও কৰক আমাক তিৰস্কাৰ ভাবিছিলো পলাৰক শিক্ষাদান দি ল'ম আমি পুৰস্কাৰ মহাৰাজ পণিপাত আপোনাৰ পুত্ৰ শনিপাত মুখে নপৰে বামান শাস্ত্ৰপাত মুঠৰ ওপৰত সকলোখিনি অত্যন্ত পলাদ আমাৰ দুজনক নিদিব গৰম হলাদ
প্ৰহ্লাদ
পিতা
সত্য নেকি গুৰু দুজনৰ কথা
হয় পিতা সত্য গুৰুদেৱৰ কথা অসত্য বুলিবলৈ মোৰ সাধ্য নাই
প্ৰহ্লাদ
তাৰ উপৰিও যি সত্য সিয়েই ভগৱান
প্ৰহ্লাদ
তেনেস্থলত পিতা অসত্য বুলি মই কওঁ কেনেকৈ
নাই প্ৰহ্লাদ নিজ সন্তান বুলি অপত্য স্নেহত বহুবাৰ কৈছো মই পুত্ৰ বুলি শিশু বুলি কৈছো পুনৰ কদাপিতো উচ্চাৰণ নকৰিবি সেই পাখণ্ডৰ নাম খণ্ড আৰু অমূৰ্খ ভাবিছিলো দুয়োজনকে মই উপযুক্ত বুলি কিন্তু কাপুৰুষ অপদাৰ্থ দুৰ্হ মোৰ সন্মুখৰ পৰা দুৰ্হ
পিতা গুৰুদেৱক মিছাতে খং নকৰিবা মইহে হৰিনাম নোলোৱাকৈ থাকিব নোৱাৰো
প্ৰহ্লাদ
পিতা
নলবি দুনাই আৰু সেই পাখণ্ডৰ নাম অতিশয় ঘিণ কৰো মই সেই শ্ৰীহৰি
পিতা শ্ৰীহৰি ঘৃণা কৰিব নাপায় তেওঁ কৰোণাময় অপাৰ কৰোণা
কুলৰ কন্তক তই কালটোত চাপিছে ওচৰ এইবাৰ চাম নাৰায়ণে তোক কিদৰে ৰক্ষা কৰে ঘাতা
আদেশ কৰক মহাৰাজ এবাৰ তোমাতালে আমাক এবাৰ কাৰ্য কৰিম সাধন
ঘাতক লৈ যা মোৰ এই কুলংকৰ পুত্ৰ প্ৰহ্লাদ লৈ যা ইয়াক বদ্ধভূমিলৈ চাম বাৰু আজি ইয়াক নাৰায়ণে কিদৰে ৰক্ষা কৰে
বলৱান
দেৱ নাৰায়ণ অবলাৰ চকুৰ পানীৰে নোৱাৰে তলাব মোক নোৱাৰে নুমাব মোৰ হৃদয়ত জ্বলি থকা প্ৰতিশোধৰ তীব্ৰ দাবানল মাতৃৰ বুকুৰ পৰা আঁচুৰি আনি পুত্ৰক দিম মোৰ শেষ আহুতি বিষ্ণুৰ বিনাশ কিম্বা নিজৰ মৰণ এই হ'ব হিৰণ্যৰ ব্ৰত জীৱনৰ এই হ'ব হিৰণ্যৰ ব্ৰত জীৱনৰ